Ready to light that fire by doing the things that make you come alive? Welcome to Health Raisers, a podcast for wise women. I'm your host, Dr. Nadine. I left a soul-crushing medical career full of bad news and evolved into a joyful health integration coach, helping hundreds of women find their healthy. You're more than your dress size. Stop putting up with toxic relationships, swallowing your true emotions, and sacrificing your mental health. Stop using your body as a battlefield. You're always giving. You deserve to put yourself first, not just for your sake, but for those you love. Wise women, let's make ourselves a priority right now. It's time to raise some health together. Wise women, today I'm bringing you a special conversation I had with my friend Steve Heatherington. This conversation has stayed with me, touching on something I've been thinking about a lot lately: growing old with curiosity, dignity, and wonder. I don't want the privilege of aging to be weighed down by shame or resignation. And that brings me to my guest today, Steve, experienced alpaca shepherd, host of the Alpaca Tribe podcast, and head of the podcasting workshop. Steve is someone who shows me, and all of us, that curiosity can be a bridge to deeper connections and lasting community. He lives his life in a way that's both open and intentional, constantly exploring and reaching out to others. Steve's curiosity isn't just for his own growth. It's how he builds community, finding common ground and sparking conversations that matter. Steve defies the narrative we're often told to fade into the background as we get older. Instead, he practices curiosity like a muscle, learning new things every day. I think you'll find his story just as inspiring as I did. Without further ado, let's start the conversation. It began when I asked Steve about his curiosity origin story, and what a journey it's been.
So what am I good at? What have I always been good at? Science is my area. Well, anything really. I used to really worry my mother. Every week we'd go down. Mum had a long-term illness, kind of ill health and stuff. She was an avid reader. So my dad would go down to the library and collect a big armful of books for her to read. Can I say this? Am I allowed to? I'm not sure to tell the secret or not. There was a little mark. He sometimes made a little mark in one of the book at the beginning or the end of the book, so he knew whether whether he'd had the book out before. This is so like my dad to think of him marking a book in the library. Oh dear! But I used to go down with him, and I'd come back with this armful of books as well. But it would always be. It wasn't fiction, it was always non-fiction books. And I came back with this really thick tome, which was Scarney on gambling. And it was how to gamble. It was all the poker stuff and the roulette. And it went through all of this stuff about gambling, every kind, and how to do it and how to win, and the different techniques that you can apply. And how old was I? I was still at school, so I must have been about 14, 15. And this worried my mother because she's thinking he's going to get into gambling. No, I had no intention. I don't think I've ever gambled. Certainly don't regularly, and we don't do the lottery or anything like that. It's not a space I would want to go to. But I was interested. I thought, let me find out about that. So I got this big book, and there was a whole bunch of things, and I would just collect all these books. And so I'm a bit of a squirrel or a magpie or whatever metaphor you want to apply that says I go collecting information. Oh, there's a rabbit hole. I'll go after that one. There's a thread that I could pull. I wonder where that goes. And that curiosity has always been there. A lot of it's been focused in the science areas I mentioned, a lot of in biology. So it was about animals and insects and the environment. and chemistry and not so much physics, but all that kind of stuff. That was my leaning was much more towards the science stuff rather than that strange area of arts and stuff. And so collecting information has always been important. Why is that? What do I do with it? Well, I don't gamble, but I did have that big book on gambling. But there was something about that following the thread, following the idea, finding out about something that fascinates me. And I think that's one of the things I've just learned is two things. One, it's a strength. Secondly, it's a weakness. because they always are, aren't they? And I think you can go too far with that. Absorbing stuff is, I've got a good memory for that kind of stuff anyway, but also finding stuff that it isn't just facts for the sake of it. There is an intent behind it. I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to be able to do that better. I'd like to know the answer. Oh, there's an interest. And occasionally, like when we were at university, fascinating lecture on behavior, animal behavior. And I then was talking to Sue, who wasn't my wife at the time, but we married as we graduated kind of thing. But I re-lectured the whole lecture. Did I use notes? I don't think so. I think I did from memory. So it was just kind of, and I was animated. I really was excited about this stuff that I was hearing about. And did you know? Oh, I always wanted to tell people things. It's quite a nuisance, that I think sometimes for people, for other people. So there's this thing of wanting to share things. Do you know how amazing this is? Did you know that, and all this kind of stuff.
After pursuing a degree in biology, Steve worked in environmental health, dealing with a wide variety of issues like food safety, pollution, and housing conditions. His work taught him to go beyond merely gathering and applying information. To his delight, Steve found fulfillment in using his knowledge to help people, even if it meant dealing with challenging situations. He attributes his love of serving his community to his father's influence.
My father was just such a lovely, gentle man who was very skilled. He became really expert in a very little thing in terms of he was an electrical engineer and stuff, and he was a very clever man. But you'd never know the kind of things he was involved in, the running committees and doing various things, international standards committees and that kind of stuff that he was involved in, and for British standards, but on European standards for safety, electrical components in hazardous atmospheres. Very specific, but you'd never know that. It was hard when I got married, or when Sue, before we got married, when she came and asked questions, I learned an awful lot about my dad and what he did, much more than I'd ever been able to winkle out of him myself. But he was such a gentleman, such a caring person who would always be watching and offering to help with lifts or doing various things. And we had a problem when I was young. A small garden, big cricket bat, and we were playing out in the back, and I hit the ball and it went over and it hit the window of the neighbor. Okay, big picture window, big enormous thing. It bounced off. There was nothing broken. It was absolutely fine. They came back from holiday because they didn't know that, because I climbed the fence to get, because we didn't always get our balls back. We had to ask very nicely, and even then it was a bit. So I know we were young kids. They were older. It was a challenge. But my dad, when they came back from holiday, he came around, oh, this window's been broken at the back, and it wasn't broken. It was a different window. It wasn't the one we hit. It wasn't anything to do with us. But the window's broken. Do you know what my dad did? He went and got some putty, and he measured up. He got the glass, and he went and he replaced that window for the neighbor. And I'm saying, but I didn't break it. It wasn't. He said, I know. That's absolutely fine. I know you said you didn't break it. I believe you. You didn't break it. But in order to have good relations with our neighbor here, I think it's important that we do this. So that's why I'm doing it. And it was that kind of generosity of heart and spirit and practical stuff, and visiting my aged aunts, with great aunts to me, but his aunts, and he would look after family, and he was just a lovely man. So I've inherited some of that, hopefully, hopefully the good bits, and stuff. Then I'm kind of thinking, sometimes I hear myself say things, and I think, I think I'm becoming like my dad. Well, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I think that kind of service and that caring for people and practical involvement of having the knowledge, and that's partly what I've got. Why I feel this is something I'm good at. I can gather the knowledge, and you've got a problem. I can help with, point you in the right direction. I can give you a signpost to that, or I can, help with some information which will benefit you. So there is this mix of. I think it's interesting. You should ask that question. There is that mix of both the wanting to help and also knowledge for its own sake. It's interesting as well thinking about leadership in the midst of all of that. What does it mean to be a leader? And I'm better at being a number two, a sort of supporter, rather than a main leader. I'm not the person to be out front. I can do the out front stuff, but it's not a natural space for me to be driving something and having the forward momentum. I've got a vision. I'm going to get there no matter what. I'm sorry. The journey is really important to me. The way I do this is as important as wherever we're trying to get to. Therefore, I'm not going to drive through and over and whatever people in order to achieve the end result. The end result's important. I recognize that, but it's much less important to me than the process of how we get there.
And now, here's an ad from our sponsor. In the mood for coffee, tea, yummy pastries, or cool swag? My friends at Infusco have got you covered. Infusco Coffee Roasters is a cozy neighborhood coffee joint in Sawyer and St. Joseph, Michigan. Infusco stands for a healthy community. They craft irresistible seasonal drinks, sourcing local artisans' products. The flavors shine from quality ingredients, and their beans are roasted on site. They do not hide behind tons of sugar. Every time I go, I'm greeted by my name with a smile. Bad service is just non-existent. It feels like stepping into a friend's living room. They keep it personal. Old school, eclectic coffee mugs on the wall, fun merch, including stickers designed by artists, t-shirts, and sweatshirts. It's the perfect place to get to know your neighbors and chat with tourists. You will always find people deep in conversation. Special events keep it fresh. Community, health, the heart of Sawyer. That's Infusco. I hope to meet you there. Next, I asked Steve to reflect upon the pros and cons of curiosity. He started with the challenges.
Answering the second question first, which is always a good policy, partly because it's a negative one. I mean, it's easier to see the negative about myself. It's normal, isn't it? So I think I'm not a perfectionist, but sometimes I spend a lot more time doing something than finishing it. I'm not a strong finisher. And I would rather take more time and feel like I got it right. Or maybe not got it wrong. That's another thing I realized just in the last couple of weeks, that actually my fear is not, it's the same thing but reversed almost. My fear is not getting it. Yeah, okay. How do I get the words right way around? I'm bothered that I might get something wrong. It's not that the fear is not. No, it's difficult to put it into words. It's the same thing about doing something. I was doing it. Okay, so the example was a report I was doing at work, and we did a whole house survey, and there was a lot of things being. The data was all being collected and collated, and then it had to be interpreted. And there was various the people who did the survey, the company that came in and did it. I was managing the project, but somebody else was doing the work and running the people who were going out there. But I was responsible for the thing. So it was that kind of level of attention to detail, and I was attending to more detail than some of the other people were. And almost to the point where I was straining at things that probably I should have been letting go. So I think my curiosity, my kind of, how does that all fit together, and what's that mean, and where does that go? I didn't need to be pursuing that as much as I need to be writing the thing and getting the words right to be able to present it to committee. What is that? Was I presenting something that was true? Well, that was important. That was important to me. But we wanted it to say a particular thing, kind of, because we already had some conclusions almost before we did the thing. We expected results were going to be like this, and then it was this is going to be used for political purposes eventually. And then you go into murky water. No, I'm after the truth. And I think I probably overdid my curiosity and stuff was down to the fine detail. I want to be right, or I don't want to be wrong. So are they the same thing? And they're not. For me, they're not. I want to be right. No, that's not my driver. That's not. I don't want to be wrong. That is my driver. That is my fear. My fear is that I'm going to be wrong, which is slightly different to not being right. It's the flip side of something. I'm not quite sure. It's very subtle, but I suddenly realized that actually the driver for me is not being wrong. Did I get the word? I'm not sure I got enough words in that sentence, but that's the thing. So I will delay making a decision because I don't want to get it wrong. So which is an interesting kind of thing. So then I rely on more information, please. I need to check the detail here, and I quickly move into detail, and that's really important, really, critical skill and all that sort of for some things, but it's not everything, and you can't have. That's why I need to be in a team. I'm not an individual sort of thing. I need to be part of a team.
He then shared an example of a moment he was most proud of when he applied his curious nature. This is where we learn how Steve discovered a passion for raising alpacas. The adorable creatures that are mistaken for llamas. This allowed him to combine his curiosity and problem-solving skills with a sense of service and connection to the natural world.
Well, today's not a very successful day. It doesn't feel like a successful day, so that's more difficult to answer that question. But stepping beyond that, I think there's something about the alpacas. When we settled on keeping alpacas, we'd had a dog previously. I'd had a hamster when I was much younger. That was my sum total of practical. I had a lot of knowledge, but that was the sum total of my practical experience of animals. But I'm thinking, I can do this. Why did I think that? I have no idea. But there was something in me that hadn't had an opportunity to be expressed. That whole thing of being a shepherd, becoming an alpaca shepherd, and caring for the animals and understanding them and observing them and being around them and all the things that go with it. I'd not had an opportunity for that to develop and, as I say, be expressed in any way. And I suddenly discovered I've got a shepherd in me that I didn't know was there. It's part of who I am. And that was a really interesting thing. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I know everything about alpacas. I know a lot because I've been keeping them for a long time now, 14 years now. So we had a lot of stuff along the way, and all the times I've made mistakes as well as the successes, and it's all part of the growing and the learning and the being hungry to get more information. For what? To be better, to care for the animals better, to preempt the problems, to do the things that need to be done. I'm sorry, there's a situation here. I've got to step in and I've got to do. Is there anybody else here? Anyone else help? No, it's down to you. There is nobody else here physically. There is only me. So I've got to step in there and I've got to try and disentangle this bramble that's wrapped itself around the neck of one of the young alpacas, and they're trapped. And if I hadn't gone that way, they would have been stuck there overnight, and they probably would have died. They were that, and each time they tried to to help themselves, they were just tightening this thing around the neck. The noose, and it was just getting, they were completely tangled. Once they're sheared, it's less of a problem. But at the time, they had a lot of fleece. But it was the youngsters, and they just got caught, and the others had come away. And in a group, you just kind of go, I'm feeling something's missing. I'm going to have to count them now because something's missing. I couldn't tell you. There's only 17 of them, but intuition. There's an intuition thing. Why did I walk that way and come round a path? I don't normally did that path. That time of the day, I would have done it in the morning, but not. So I only happened across this animal that was stuck. Well, it was good that I had, and there are things like that, and I think we pick up all kinds of cues, and there are things, and you go, oh, that's interesting. Sometimes it's out of the corner of your eye. Sometimes it's you're looking at one thing and you see another thing, and you go, oh, that's interesting. Some of it is they don't seem right. I don't know what's wrong with them. And you can go into you can test the temperature and do all this stuff, and they appear to be, but there's something about them that's not right. And then the next day or whatever, you realize, no, there it is. Now I can see that's the problem. That's what the thing. But you pick up on things and you focus on what's normal, and then you see the abnormal. And it's not concentrating on the problem. And I've never lost that sense of wonder, really.
I was curious to understand how Steve's curiosity has changed with time. His biggest takeaway? Learning to adapt and acclimate.
We learn to be smarter, and we do things better, we do things more efficiently and that kind of stuff. But there's still a limit, and you kind of go, okay, so what is it? What's the trajectory here? Oh, doom and gloom. I'm about to die. No, I'm sorry, I'm not. But I need to face that I've got an accumulation of grey hair and therefore years. And there are some things that I've got to do differently, and some things that I probably got to say I can't do that. But what can I do? What's my what's the value of my contribution that I can give into whatever setting, and where am I going to do that? Is it in writing? Is it in speaking? Is it in podcasting? I know how to do this. I know how to podcast. What am I going to do with that? What's my responsibility to use that gift that I've been given in a way that really brings benefit? And I have a little challenge sometimes with telling stories about the alpacas. They go, well, who's benefiting from that? Well, okay, it's a bit of entertainment. Well, yeah, but I'm also communicating about the things we should be doing with the alpaca. So it's an education angle in there as well. And maybe telling stories just because it's gives people a taste of this is a thing you don't know. This is normal for me, but this is not normal for most people. I realize that. And therefore maybe that's got a benefit in itself. And it's also talking about the environment. And, oh, did you hear that? That was a goose. That was there's a woodpecker just flown across the thing. We tend to see those ones. We tend to hear these ones rattling on the trees, but that's a different type. And so I can actually talk about the environment and talk about the range of things that are going on and the things that happen differently through the year as the seasons progress.
Finally, our conversation couldn't end without asking Steve about his personal definition of health.
What it means to be healthy. The World Health Organization, that was one of the things when I was studying environmental health, with their definition of what health is, and it's not the absence of sickness or illness. It's much more the completeness. And I think, to me, that was a revelation at the time. And not that I was against thinking that, I just had never thought it. Never come across the idea of actually there's a bigger thing and that health, and I think health is to do with, if I'd been really clever, I would have worked it out and written it down. But it's to do with peace. I think for me, that's the thing that is it's a place of peace. It's a place of rest. So that kind of sense of being at peace, being at rest, and not striving. So that the health is there, but it's it's also, if this phrase makes sense, a dynamic equilibrium. So that it's a moving thing that you have to keep adjusting. You can't ignore. Health is something that is there, and is changing and becoming worse or becoming better. But there's a center to it, which is that place of peace and a place of rest.
Wise women, move from last place to first place in your life. Stop using your body as a battlefield. Let's raise health together with a customized health plan just for you. Contact me at npkhealthintegration.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.